Welcome to another edition of Expressions of Faith Ministries. Today we're going to talk a little bit about the word Sharia law. This word's been passed around a little bit around the country, and I don't think a lot of people understand what it really means, what Sharia law really is. It's the Islamic law that are in these countries, these Muslim countries, and it is their law that states their belief systems, their different aspects of their everyday life. So what I'm going to do today a little bit is kind of explain a little bit about Sharia law and some implications of if we allow Sharia law to infiltrate our country, what that could mean. So in English, Sharia is often referred to as Islamic law. Sharia is etymologically grounded in archaic Arabic and means the clear pathway leading to the water source. Sharia is generally composed of four parts: the Quran, or the Holy Book of Islam, the Sunnah, which is a record of the habits, sayings, and actions of Islam's prophet Muhammad, and also the Hadith, which are the recollections and stories collected by early Islamic scholars about the life of Muhammad. And finally, the fiqh, or the fatwa, which are like commands, which are interpretations of Sharia law and non-binding opinions written by Islamic scholars. An example, one of the fatwa by Osama bin Laden was to kill. He gives out like an order to kill Christians in whatever areas they're at, and they're like specific orders. So what does and does not count as Sharia is of a debate in the Islamic world, as well as the extent to which it should be administered in public and private affairs. So we're going to look at a few different areas and talking about the Sunni and the Shia, how they interpret and use Sharia law. Scope of the application. According to some Muslims, Sharia should be brought to bear on every applicable situation in every aspect of public and private life. Such people generally support the idea of drafting constitutions in compliance with Sharia law, while others would like to see the Sharia and the Quran in particular adopted instead of separate constitutions. Still others contend that Sharia should not be thought of as a legal code, but rather as a set of spiritual standards by which to lead someone's life. So it depends on what area of the Muslim world that you live is determining how to implement Sharia law. And it also depends on the dominance, the control of Islam in a particular area on how they use Sharia law. So traditional Sunni approach is traditionally Sunni Muslims consider the Quran and the Sunnah the primary source and master code of all Sharia law. Additionally, they allowed some space for consensus decisions reached by Muhammad's companions after his death. The rulings of Islamic legal scholars in certain cases, since the Quran and the Sunnah cannot possibly encompass every possible conflict, Sunnis generally allow for judgments based upon analogical reasoning with the directives laid out by the Quran and the Sunnah, or where consensus among the scholars, the jurists, or other kinds of lawmakers prevail. So it's very wide in the interpretation of how they use the Sharia law and different aspects of the Sharia law. Traditional Shiite approach, the Shiites are traditionally less liberal than the Sunnis when it comes to consensus and reasoning by analogy from the Quran, while in some instances simultaneously expanding the scope of the Sharia proper to include fatwas as binding. So, like I mentioned earlier, one of the fatwas by Osama bin Laden was to specifically orders to kill Christians in Saudi Arabia. That was one of his, and talking about the troops that were in Saudi Arabia, was a direct order, command, was one of the, to go ahead and kill the American troops that were in Saudi Arabia. So it's very wide scope. It seems like these leaders can just mention whatever, and these high Muslim scholars can mention whatever they want, throw this fatwa out there, and it all of a sudden becomes Sharia law. So customs and application of Sharia. It is not uncommon for some to confuse Sharia with local and tribal customs, thus causing them to apply these customs as it were part of Sharia. For example, the requirement to dress modestly provided by the Quran is often confused with strict accordance to dominant local dress codes, especially in regards to women. In reality, particular standards are not provided in detail. In addition, it can sometimes lead to overly strict application and penalties when someone transgresses a law. In certain areas like Saudi Arabia, the women wearing the burqa, the entire clothes, none of them, they can't be shown. None of their body can be shown. While in other countries, Muslim countries, they're a little less strict with Sharia law. Countries applying Sharia as law. Today, many different countries apply Sharia law to different degrees. Countries such as Saudi Arabia, for example, employ a very strict and traditional version of Sharia law. Other countries, such as Pakistan, Indonesia, Egypt, and Afghanistan, all apply a mixed law, applying a modern constitution which is heavily influenced by Sharia principles as the core of their legal system. Still, other Muslim countries are modern secular states, wherein applying Sharia law is strictly prohibited, as it would transgress the separation of church and state. However, some citizens of these countries still try to follow the Sharia law in their personal day-to-day lives. Turkey is the most salient of this example. So again, different areas, different cultures, different tribes, sects of Islam, they interpret and apply different areas, and how they apply the Sharia law in their countries, depending on if it's a theocratic government or if it's a secular government. They all use it, but in different varying degrees. Sharia laws for women. Muslim life is guided by a set of laws and guidelines known as Sharia. Sharia law developed hundreds of years after the death of the Prophet Muhammad in about 632. According to the Council on Foreign Relations, Sharia law outlines strict guidelines for the rights and treatment of women in Muslim countries. Women in Muslim countries such as Pakistan, Iran, Iraq, and Saudi Arabia face varying limitations on their freedom in, say, driving, interaction with men, and dress codes. Violation of Sharia law risks serious punishment or death. So imagine a woman driving in any of these countries, Pakistan, Iran, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, could face the death penalty just for driving, and maybe exposing parts of her skin, not wearing the burqa. They face these punishments up to death, which is pretty archaic. Controversy surrounds Sharia law's treatment of women. But you won't see this in America, or like in the news about these whippings, these honor killings, which we'll get to in a little bit. Our country doesn't want to use the words honor killing, even though it is very, very real. They don't want to use these words because, again, they will look at the Quran as being an evil book, and for whatever reason our country is not wanting to label that religion, and they're trying to say that it's tolerant and that it's peaceful. Look at anything that's the teachings of the Quran, and specifically the Sharia law. it is nothing, it is anything but peaceful. Marriage laws. Sharia law and the practices on or Sharia law states that a Muslim woman can only marry a Muslim man. She cannot marry without the permission of her current guardian. That's the thing. All women under Sharia law have a guardian. Prior to their marriage, it's a relative. They are their guardian. They're not like they're not their own people like here in the United States. They're free. They're their own person. No, not so much. Not in an Islamic ruled country. Even probably in England, the same thing. These women under the Sharia law, they have guardians that watch over them and make sure that they are following all these different aspects of Sharia law. So the idea of being free as a woman in an Islamic country is non-existent. After the woman is married, her husband becomes her new guardian. While Muslim men can have several wives, Sharia law limits a woman to one husband. A woman who wants a divorce must ask the consent of her husband. She can't just go and file for a divorce. She has to ask permission to divorce him. And if he grants it, then she has to pay back the dowry, the money. So it's not free. They are so under the bondage of this law and these men. It's outrageous. Sharia law dictates the treatment and expectations of Muslim women in legal procedures. A former lawyer in Iran wrote an article detailing Muslim laws on Iran-bulletin.org. Arshadai states that Muslim women accused of adultery face lashing or stoning to death. Sharia law dictates that a woman is subject to this punishment after it is proven by a witness of 4 just men or 3 just men and 2 women, or according to Arshadai's article. Arshadai states that the testimony of women is worthless in court. So if a woman is raped in a Muslim country and there is 3 witnesses that watch this, we know what these 3 if these 3 women witnesses actually watch the act of this woman being raped, their testimony is non-existent. It doesn't exist. So they can't testify in a court, even though they're eyewitnesses to the event of a woman being raped. Their testimony is non-existent. So the women in an Islamic country are treated less than human. Crimes such as homosexuality, adultery, drinking alcohol, and combat against the Islamic regime can only be proven by the testimony of men in court. A woman who has witnessed a crime such as rape or robbery has no right to bear witness in court. If she does testify, she can face the punishment of accusation, which is 80 lashes. So if she goes ahead and testifies, even though her testimony is worthless, she faces 80 lashes just for the fact that she testified. Segregation. Under Sharia law, women and men face strict segregation guidelines. Women are not allowed to speak to men they are not directly related to. As outlined by an article at faithfreedom.org, the article Living Under Sharia, the plight of women in Saudi Arabia explains an incident in 2007 where a group of Saudi young youths found a woman and a man in a car. The woman was not related to the man, and 14 youths raped her. The Saudi court convicted the woman of violating Sharia segregation laws. She was sentenced to 6 months in jail and 200 lashes. The youths that raped her were given 1 to 5 years of jail time. We read this and we think, what in the world are we doing? What are we doing about this? And then we have politicians that are and our own government is allowing this to happen in our own country, even though right now they're considered like the minority in our country. We're allowing this slowly to infiltrate into our own country. And for someone, the imam of the Ground Zero Mosque, saying that our Constitution is like 90% compliant with Sharia law is a joke. Just look at the treatment of women under the Sharia law and look at our Constitution. I don't see how he can say it. It is just bottom line. It's a joke how he can say this. What are the different types of Sharia law? There are three types of crimes classified under Sharia law: the had, tazir, and qisas. Had crimes are the most serious and include adultery, alcohol consumption, and theft. Punishments can include stoning, exile, amputation, and flogging. Tazir covers the crimes not mentioned in the Quran, and the punishment is at the discretion of the judge, the qazi. Qisas crimes are of a retaliatory nature and include murder or offense just short of murder. The victim or a family member is entitled to equal justice. They can attempt or accept monetary compensation or insist on public execution. According to Muslim-Canada.org, the qazi must follow prescribed punishments for serious offenses, meaning the had, but has discretion on how to address less serious crimes. About 50 Muslim states use Sharia law, but each country might apply different interpretations that result in subtle differences in the law. The Sharia code tends to be more flexible in countries with a more proportionate mix of Muslims and non-Muslims. So if the population is the majority Muslims, well, then they're going to use a little bit more stricter code and their interpretations are going to be a little bit less lenient. Or no, let me rephrase that. Let me take that back. If it's a predominant Muslim country, they're more strict on applying the interpretations of Sharia law. But in a country like here, you're not going to see, like in the United States, if we have like these Muslims, or right now they're attempting to bring the Sharia law into these different courts, and we see these different things happening in like Dearborn, Michigan. We see this down in Florida, where these judges are kind of incorporating a little bit of the Sharia law aspect into our own judicial court system. Well, you're not going to see someone getting stoned to death. You're not going to see these lashes because they're the minority in our country right now. If it is changed, then it's a whole different ballgame. If the Muslim population outgrows the population of the believers here in the United States. Sharia law recognizes no separation amongst church and state, but is only applicable to Muslims. Some countries use a hybrid of Sharia and other laws to address crime. For example, Tunisia, Sharia only governs divorce, inheritance, banking, family law, and contracts. So that's just a real quick overview of what Sharia law is. And it's a scary concept if we're going to allow that in our country and to be a ruling factor in our own court system. It totally violates the Constitution. It violates the individual rights of the person, specifically females. And so we need to really look into it and say, what are we doing by allowing this in our country? So I'm going to change this a little bit, and a different avenue where I want to look at. A lot of these people are saying, again, a lot of our politicians and these Muslims leaders, these imams, are saying that this religion is peaceful. Again, in a separate video, we've shown that it is not peaceful, that in their own book, in their Quran, it teaches to destroy the people of the book, meaning the Christians and the Jews. So, what about that is peaceful? I don't know. But when we look at the Quran and we look at the principles, and specifically the fact of them being obliged to lie to us, they're almost commanded to lie to us. So when you're talking to this individual and he's saying it's a peaceful religion and we need no harm, and I'm specifically talking about the mosque at Ground Zero, the imam there, where this is going to be a cultural center to bring awareness and to try to coexist and this tolerance and stuff. No, they're obliged to lie. And if you don't understand that principle, then you're going to be fooled. If you've done any kind of research on the principles of Islam, especially the principle of them being able to lie to you for the purpose of furthering Islam, their God, Allah, will not hold that against them. It's okay. It's even commanded to lie to the infidel. So I'm going to look at that a little bit. Are Muslims permitted to lie? Muslim scholars teach that Muslims should generally be truthful to each other, from Muslim to Muslim. Generally be truthful, unless the purpose of lying is to smooth over differences. There are two forms of lying to non-believers, infidels, us, that are permitted under certain circumstances, taqiyya and kitman. These circumstances are typically those that advance the cause of Islam. Again, advance the cause of Islam. Their whole purpose is to Islamize the world. Okay, that's their purpose. So, do you think it's okay for them to lie to us? Is this furthering their cause? Absolutely, it is. These circumstances are typically those that advance the cause of Islam. In some cases, by gaining the trust of non-believers in order to draw out their vulnerability and to defeat them. Okay, the Quran in Surah 16:106 establishes that there are circumstances that can compel a Muslim to lie. Quran 3:28. This verse tells Muslims not to take those outside the faith, as meaning non-believers, or they'll use the people of the book, meaning Jews and Christians, as friends, unless it is to guard themselves. And we're talking about these true. We don't. There's no such thing as a radical Islam. Radical Islam just means, we can redefine that word, radical Islam. These individuals that our government is classifying as radical Islam, they're just the true followers of the teachings of the Quran. That is all they are. They're not like this radical part. They are just the true followers of the Quran. Allah and His Messenger, in Surah 9:3, Allah and His messengers are free from liability to the idolaters. The dissolution of oaths with the pagans who remained at Mecca following its capture, they did nothing wrong but were evicted anyway. Surah 40:28, a man is introduced as a believer, but one who must hide his faith among those who are not believers. Surah 2:25, Allah will not call you to account for those thoughtlessness in your oaths, but for the intention in your heart. So according to a Muslim, if the intent in your heart, in their heart, is to further the cause of Islam, then Allah is giving them permission, and it is okay. He is not going to hold that against them for lying to a non-believer, because their purpose in their heart is to further the cause of Islam. Allah has already ordained you, and this is in Surah 66:2. Allah has already ordained you, or ordained for you, O men, the dissolution of your oaths. So he's already said it's okay. It's okay that if you can lie. Your oath, your promise, you telling this truth, you're making this covenant with this individual. It's okay for you to lie. Allah will not call you, and this is in Surah 225, call you to account for thoughtfulness in your oaths, but for the intention in your hearts. The context of this remark is in also marriage, which explains why Sharia law spouses to lie to each other, or explains why Sharia allows spouses to lie to each other for the greater good. Surah 66:2, Allah has already ordained you, O man, a dissolution of oaths. So I've already read that. Surah 3:54, and they, the disbelievers, schemed, and Allah schemed against them, and Allah is the best of the schemers, meaning the best of the liars. The Arabic word used for scheme or plot is makara, which literally means deceit. If Allah is deceitful toward unbelievers, then there is little basis for denying that Muslims are allowed to do the same. Okay, taken collectively, these verses are interpreted to mean that there are circumstances when a Muslim may be compelled to deceive others for the greater purpose. We're going to stop right there, and then we're going to go on. So we kind of looked at in the Quran as far as the teaching of lying. So when we pick it up next time, we're going to look at what the Hadith says about lying, and is it permissible, and who is it permissible for and to for a Muslim to lie. So again, this has been another edition of Expressions in Faith Ministries. Hope you have enjoyed this, and may the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob bless you. And I ask that we all come to the faith, and we all come to the saving knowledge of Jesus Christ as our Lord and Savior. Thank you, and may God bless you.